Is Jayson Tatum questioning returning to the Boston Celtics this season? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Maljanian, currently your host of Boston Balling and the Locked On Red Sox podcast as well, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's a daily Boston Red Sox podcast that I do, so make sure you check out that show as well. But I am here to talk about everything going on with Boston sports, whether that's the Patriots going to the Super Bowl, the Celtics having a much better season than people expected without Jayson Tatum, the Bruins being on a surprise tear as well this season, and the Red Sox with an off season that is yet to be desired. So lots of Boston sports discussion on here. I am here primarily Monday through Thursday with brand new Boston Balling episodes with some guests along the way. So make sure that you subscribe on any podcast platform. But today is all about the Celtics, who are in a position to make a good playoff run. Now, when it comes to where they stand currently, they are currently in second place in the Eastern Conference with a record of 29-17, behind the Pistons, who are in first place with a record of 34-11. The Knicks are right behind the Celtics, though, in third place with a 28-18 record. Now, this is all before the game that the Celtics do play tonight. So obviously, things could fluctuate a little bit there, but the Celtics do have a home game tonight against the Atlanta Hawks. So where do things stand for the Celtics right now? I mean, they're in a good spot. They're feeling it. They have chemistry, and they are ready to make a big playoff push. What's exciting about that? They still don't have their franchise superstar in Jayson Tatum, and there's been a lot of speculation about Jayson Tatum coming back and returning to this Celtics team down the stretch. And prior to the season starting, he said that his goal was to return in February or March, make, a all-star break return or something dramatic like that. And from an injury timeline perspective, it's looking like that could be a possibility. But the thing is Jayson Tatum questioning it. That is the biggest thing that has people buzzing over the last couple of days, because for a while the talk was, I'm so anxious to get back. I can't wait to contribute to this team. I want to be back by February or March latest. And the Celtics would certainly welcome him back with open arms, no doubt about it. But he said something recently that has people wondering if he really wants to come back or not. Ever since tearing his Achilles tendon last May, he's truly been working tirelessly to get back onto the court for this team. And now he's 36 weeks removed from surgery and is getting close to being able to play from a physical standpoint. While the Celtics have looked really good without him and are currently the second seed in the Eastern Conference, like I mentioned, they certainly would welcome him back, no doubt about it. And he went on a podcast yesterday and mentioned some hesitation about coming back and potentially disrupting the team chemistry. He said they have an identity this year, or things that they felt have clicked for them, and it's been successful. There could obviously be some challenges. Do I come back or should I wait? It's something that I recently, in the last 2 weeks or so, just kind of contemplate every single day. He went on to say more so about the team. If or when do I come back this season? They would have played 50 some odd games without me. So it's hard to basically navigate that, essentially. So that's interesting, because for the longest time, it was Tatum talking about, I'm so excited to come back and contribute to this team. And there's no mystery about the fact that the Celtics really would need him, or at least their chances would be a lot higher of winning a championship this season if he were to come back. If they're already holding their own without him, this team clearly is talented. There's no doubt about it, but they've struggled against good teams this year. They struggled against the Pistons. They lost against the Nuggets in a close game. So you think about the Celtics right now, and their ability, no doubt about it, is there. But when they face the best of the best in the Eastern Conference, or if they get to the finals in the Western Conference, they're going to need Jayson Tatum to make that happen. But that quote from him to me indicates that he may not be sold on the idea of coming back. Why? Because he's trying to look out for his teammates. He's trying to say, well, if they have a good thing going right now without me, then why would I interfere with that? Because the last thing I want to do is come back and break up the chemistry that they have, because on-court chemistry is huge in basketball. You don't find that it's as prevalent in other sports. Yes, it's important for you to have that chemistry. I would say hockey is another big sport where the on the ice chemistry is important. So chemistry isn't an underrated thing. Chemistry is a real thing. And if things are clicking, it becomes a balance of trying to make your team better without breaking that chemistry. And that's something that the Celtics front office and Brad Stevens have to navigate and deal with regularly, is how much do we do to change this team when things are working so well right now? Because on one hand, you want to acknowledge, okay, we can continue to add to this team to make it the best it can possibly be at the trade deadline, but we also want to make sure that things are still looking good with where we're at, and that the team we have in front of us is able to be at its best. So the point that Jayson Tatum is making is, what if I'm physically ready to come back and I get the all clear to come back in February or March? But what if that makes things worse for them? Because what if they take a step back? And I've mentioned this on the show before in the last couple of weeks, that a return by Jayson Tatum is fantastic, because obviously he's the best player on the team. Him back with Jaylen Brown as one of the best duos in basketball is great. And that's all something that would no doubt give them a boost. But what if it takes a while for him to get reacclimated? What if this Celtics team, with the way they're playing right now and things are working, what if it doesn't work as well as they hope, and he breaks up that chemistry and guys have to relearn their roles on this team? That's the only risk that comes with this. And that's why he might be hesitant about it. And honestly, if anything, that shows the selflessness of a guy like Jayson Tatum to be able to step up and say, hey, look, I want to do what's best for the team. As much as I am ready and anxious to come back out there and play and be with this team, I can't be selfish here, and I need to think about what's best for the Boston Celtics. And if what's best for the Boston Celtics is me waiting it out until next year to come back, then maybe I should do that. So on one hand, I respect that. But on the other hand, you have to think about, well, me coming back would give this team a massive boost. And Jaylen Brown is obviously stepping up at an MVP level right now without Jayson Tatum. And he has really been filling that void that people were worried the Celtics were going to miss without Tatum out there. Brown really has stepped up as that leader on and off the floor. He's been the guy that this team has relied on to be able to be that heart of the team and the guy that really is keeping the operation moving at a high level. So if I'm Jaylen Brown right now, I'm really liking the way that I'm playing, but I'm also excited for Jayson Tatum to return. And the biggest thing with Jaylen Brown is that he truly is at his best when he is that secondary option to Jayson Tatum. And while we're seeing this version of him right now, he's going to have to be able to adapt to being that secondary guy again when Tatum comes back. And that could be another thing that throws off that pressure and chemistry for the Celtics, and the way that they're playing right now could be jeopardized because of that. Because if you take the way Jaylen Brown's playing right now at an MVP caliber level, best player on the team right now, if he has to back off from his role right now when Tatum comes back, that could take some getting used to. And when it comes to their stats head to head, they have generally a lot of similar stats. Overall, Jaylen has played in 646 games compared to Tatum's 585. And obviously, this goes to show that generally the two have played the same amount until Tatum suffered this injury. So generally, they're both pretty healthy and durable, and they're both able to play a lot, which is a good sign. Tatum averages 23.6 points per game, whereas Jaylen generally averages 19.7 points per game. He's been averaging a lot more than that this season because he's had no choice but to step up into a bigger role without Tatum here. But generally, when both of them are playing, he's averaging 19.7 points per game. Assists per game, Tatum's averaging 3.8, whereas Jaylen averages 2.8. So again, a little bit of a secondary option overall stat-wise with where Jaylen Brown is at compared to Jayson Tatum right now. Steals per game, this is almost the same, almost identical. Tatum 1.1 steals per game, Jaylen Brown 1.0. So slightly Tatum has the edge there, but Jaylen is also averaging around the same amount. And then blocks per game, Jayson Tatum 0.7, whereas Jaylen Brown 0.4. So another category in which they statistically are pretty close, but Tatum still contributes more in that category when he's out there. So my point with looking at all of that is because Jayson Tatum is known to contribute in all facets of the game when it comes to his offense, his defense, being able to steal the ball, being able to rebound, being able to assist, being able to score, that's all notable. And while Jaylen Brown does that at a little bit lesser of a degree than Tatum when they're both out there, he's still doing it at a high level too. And the fact that he's been able to step up and do it at an even higher level this year in Tatum's absence has been absolutely huge for this team. But the question I have now is, what is that going to turn into for them moving forward? Are they going to be able to still compete at a really high level with Tatum in the fold compared to if Tatum wasn't in the fold right now? So that was the point he was bringing up, and the overarching point of this part of the conversation was to say, I don't think Tatum's return in February or March is as guaranteed as you think it is, even if he's cleared to play. Because obviously, mentally, he likes the way that this team is playing right now without him, and he's worried that him coming back would ruin some of that a little bit. So good for Jayson Tatum for being honest and open about it. And the question is, will we see Jayson Tatum on the floor over the next couple months? It sounds like a lot of that is going to be up to him and whether he feels like it's best for the team for him to come back. But I know the Celtics would push for it because they know that with Jayson Tatum out there, they could make a serious and deep postseason run, which is what makes all of this so exciting. So we'll have to see what Tatum decides. But coming up, I'm going to be talking about Giannis and how it looks like he's going to be shopped at the trade deadline. Are the Celtics a realistic option? Don't forget to follow Boston Balling and subscribe on any podcast platform, including YouTube. I am here with new episodes, generally Monday through Thursday, but 4 days a week will be the general pattern, with some bonus episodes mixed in, especially with the Patriots being in the Super Bowl, which is obviously very exciting. I plan to mix in some extra Patriots episodes with some fun guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. So make sure that you tune into those episodes as well, because you don't want to miss these exciting guests that I have lined up. If you want to hear more regular Red Sox talk, make sure you also follow my show Locked On Red Sox on any podcast platform as well. And I am here to discuss the nitty-gritty of what goes on with the Boston Red Sox on a day-to-day basis. So make sure that you're checking out both of those shows and follow me on social media. So rumor has it that Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Milwaukee Bucks superstar, is ready to be traded. And the NBA trade deadline is on February 5th. So right around the corner next week. And there's a really strong chance that Giannis is going to be with another team by the time the trade deadline hits. And that's good news for me. I just want this to be over with because he's on my fantasy basketball team. And unfortunately, my fantasy basketball team has been struggling because he keeps missing time due to injury. But you have to wonder if some of that is because he doesn't want to be there anymore. And it's upsetting because Giannis, to me, was always a player who was so loyal to Milwaukee. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I liked him as a player and had a lot of respect for him, because he kept choosing to stay there. And it seemed like he was going to be loyal to the Bucks no matter what. But he's fed up. He is ready to be traded, and the chances that he would be traded are pretty high. And I'm seeing some likely suitors in there, like the Heat, the Warriors, the Knicks. Those are all teams who I could see pulling off a likely trade for him. And imagine Steph Curry paired with Giannis at Golden State. That would feel kind of unfair. And the Warriors' little dynasty there that they created could potentially be back. So there are all of these possibilities and all of these options, but are the Celtics an option? And that's something that I decided to explore. Realistically, I don't see the Celtics being interested in trading for Giannis. For one, because of the price that they would have to pay, and they would basically blow up their entire chemistry that they have going for them right now if they were to trade for Giannis, because they would need to trade from their core in order to bring him here. And I don't think they'd be on board with that. And for two, if they do feel like Tatum is ready and able to come back in the next month or two, they're not going to want to jeopardize what that could entail. And having a guy like Jayson Tatum here to help lead your team, you don't necessarily need a guy like Giannis. The Celtics do need a center. Obviously, that's something that I definitely feel like they are going to look into at the trade deadline. But in order to trade for a guy like Giannis, here is exactly what the Celtics are looking at. Essentially, they would need a lot. And the trade would have to start with Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown. They have no other option, really. Giannis is making about $48 to $50 million a year right now. So one huge salary would have to go out the door. That starts with Tatum and Brown, who are getting paid a lot by the Celtics. No choice other than that, because if they want to be able to bring in Giannis and take on that salary, that was where it would start. That alone would likely cause the Celtics to say no, but just for fun, let's continue. It would start with Tatum or Brown, not both. They wouldn't need to move both, and I don't think the Bucks would ask them to move both, but definitely one of those two. And if the Bucks even answered the phone to entertain the idea of trading him to Boston, they would also probably demand at least 4 to 5 first-round picks, either unprotected or lightly protected, and 2 to 3 pick swaps. So that's a lot of picks that the Celtics would have to give up for years to come in order to make this work. So Boston technically can offer future picks, but some are already owed and others would be very late firsts, which lowers their value. So multiple premium draft assets is definitely something that Milwaukee would ask for on top of Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown. And I'm not even done yet. So a third team likely would have to be involved, because the Celtics not only would have to send additional role players, like we're looking at a Derek White or Peyton Pritchard type of player here, but a third team would also probably have to convert those into younger players or picks that Milwaukee actually wants. So the Celtics essentially would have to partner with a third team that has the picks that they could give up to essentially send to Milwaukee to make this happen. And then the Celtics would acquire players from that third team potentially too. And then maybe Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown and Derek White, for example, would be sent. That's a steep price to pay. A realistic framework, and again, this likely is not going to happen, but again, just for fun, is that the Celtics would receive Giannis and the Bucks would receive likely Jaylen Brown, multiple pick swaps, 4 to 5 first round picks, and a young rotation player or two that's either from the Celtics or via a third team. So we're looking at maybe Derek White and Jaylen Brown plus a player from a third team that could be sent, and they're losing picks. And even then, Milwaukee might still say no if they don't feel like they want to fully rebuild, or there's another team that comes in and outbids Boston, which could happen. So I don't think this is realistic. I don't think it's going to happen. Obviously, Giannis on the Celtics would be pretty crazy, but at the same time, I also don't want to destroy the chemistry and the talent they have for one player. I get that there are teams that would do that and could do that, but it doesn't feel like the smartest thing for the Celtics to be willing to go and give up the pieces that they have for Giannis. And I'm not doing it, but that is essentially what it might look like if they were to make that type of trade. So from a pure asset standpoint, there are other teams like the Warriors who likely would go more in on giving up assets for a guy like Giannis. It doesn't really feel like that's how Brad Stevens operates. He knows that the Celtics are currently the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. He knows that they can't really afford to lose a lot of those pieces if they want to compete and really make a deep playoff run this year. And in order to bring in Giannis, they would have to lose probably at least 2 pieces of that puzzle. And would that even put them in the best spot to moving forward be able to succeed? Because you have to think about the chemistry that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown have together. And I talked about this earlier on in the show. The chemistry that those two have established as a duo, we don't know if that can be matched. If the Celtics were to make a trade for Giannis and they were to ship off Jaylen Brown, how do we know that the combination of Tatum and Giannis is going to work in the same way that the combination of Tatum and Brown worked? We don't. And that's another big risk that they'd be taking, because from a personality standpoint, not every player works well with every other player. And this is why I go back to what I said at the top of the show about team chemistry and the Celtics really embracing that chemistry that they have. Do they want to take the risk that maybe Tatum and Giannis wouldn't play as well together as Tatum and Brown play? So that's another question that needs to be asked here. So realistically, it's obviously fun to dream about Giannis in a Celtics uniform, but he hasn't said, I need to go to Boston. That's not the team that I would accept specifically. Obviously, the Celtics are in a winning window, so I don't think he would say no to going, but he hasn't expressed the Celtics as one of his preferred teams, so I don't think the Celtics would go all out to make that type of trade. It would seriously require Jaylen Brown plus the next decade of picks and probably somebody else too. And even then, not guaranteed. So the idea of it is fun to dream, but likely not going to happen. But speaking of the trade deadline and Giannis presumably going elsewhere, where do the Celtics stand going into the trade deadline? I talked about it recently on the show that they definitely do need a center to round out this team at the trade deadline. The question is, who is that center going to be? Now, a player that could be on the trading block for a center is likely Anfernee Simons. I guess they tried to propose Anfernee Simons in a trade to the Clippers. The Clippers said no, so I'm sure they're still going to shop him, and this is the right time to trade him if they're going to do it, because his value is really high, because he has been in sixth man of the year conversations once he started to really get going offensively and was able to be a huge contributor on the offensive side of the ball. So this is a good time to trade him if they are going to. He's on an expiring $27.6 million contract, which does make him an ideal trade chip for Boston to acquire a needed starting center. And some of those targets could include a guy like Nick Claxton, for example. So his recent play and the Celtics' strong performance, all of that could be a reason why it could be difficult for them to want to trade him. But if they want to address areas of need at the deadline, he seems to be a player that it would make sense to move. So the consensus right now points toward the Celtics using his valuable contract and talent to upgrade the front court for a championship push before the trade deadline. It's a large expiring salary, so that makes him a prime trade asset to match salaries for a big name player. And because the Celtics need an impact starting center, they could use his contract to target guys like a Nick Claxton, like I mentioned, but also Ivica Zubac, who was the player they already reached out about, and that trade was rejected, unfortunately. There's also the gap year acquisition idea when it comes to Simons. He was brought in as a temporary piece after the Jrue Holiday trade with expectations that he'd be moved later. So when the Celtics brought him in, they didn't necessarily see him as a player that they were going to use in the bigger piece of the puzzle anyway down the road. So them trading him wouldn't come as a surprise because he was supposed to be a temporary piece as it is. So they could probably afford to move him now, especially again, like I talked about with the idea of Jayson Tatum potentially coming back. So I do think it's a possibility that that happens, especially when somebody who's starting right now gets shifted potentially to the bench with Tatum coming back and being activated. So you could argue that they should keep him because he's playing well right now, has recently found his rhythm, scoring in bunches and truly boosting the Celtics offense, which could make him harder to trade. And also, he does provide an offensive spark. His scoring ability adds a dimension that the team values. So there are assets of his game that the Celtics really do value, but do those assets outweigh the assets that they're thinking could be good trade pieces? And I'm thinking the answer is no. If you look at the overall picture of what he provides, is it game changing enough to the point where they can't afford to trade him? No. I'm thinking that is not going to be the answer for the Celtics. A popular proposal involves swapping Simons for Hawks center Onyeka Okongwu. So that is an interesting name to watch out for as Boston looks for a big man at the upcoming trade deadline. And also the Brooklyn Nets are an interesting team for, like I mentioned, Nick Claxton or Ivica Zubac from the Clippers, which supposedly that trade was shut down. So there are options there, but do we see Anfernee Simons on this roster after the trade deadline? I'm thinking the answer is probably no. And as much as I've enjoyed watching him this season, I do think it's a likely possibility that he is a guy who is on the move. But I do like a lot of the depth that the Celtics have right now. And I don't feel like trading him would put them significantly far behind when it comes to their depth. I think there are plenty of guys who could slot in, and that is the beauty of having a team like the Boston Celtics. You need to be deep. You need to be able to have that next man up mentality. You need to be able to have those guys off the bench who can come in and really step up, and that's what Simons has provided. But that's what other players can continue to provide. With the emergence of players like Jordan Walsh and even Hugo Gonzalez in the season that he's having this year, the young players who are gaining confidence, I really like seeing that in them. Luka Garza is another player who falls into this category as a young player who has provided a lot of value this season and has been able to, from a confidence standpoint, be able to step up. So while I'm really looking forward to having Jayson Tatum back and the possibility of that, and while I'm looking forward to seeing what the Celtics do at the trade deadline, I do think Anfernee Simons is a guy who they logically could move without stepping them too far back in the Eastern Conference, because again, this is part of the business. You have to trade guys in order to make your team better. And this is a scenario in which it just makes sense for that to happen. So will they trade for Giannis? Will he be the guy? Most likely not. Will Anfernee Simons be a guy who gets moved? Probably. Could we also see them maybe move on from a smaller piece of this roster, somebody who doesn't get a lot of playing time and may not be part of the puzzle? I do think that's also a likely possibility, but I think Simons is the biggest name that we could see moved at this trade deadline. It's just a matter of who and what team really wants to take him, because a team that brings him in now is definitely getting a good one. He's a hard worker, he hustles, and he provides a lot of value, and that spark that the Celtics need off the bench is certainly something that he provides, but they could get that spark elsewhere, or it could be a really good opportunity for another player to step up if he does get traded and take on that role off the bench. Now, the question is going to be, if another player comes off the bench and steps up in his place, is that player going to be able to play up to the level of the sixth man of the year aspect that we're seeing from Simons? Not necessarily. So that could be an aspect that hurts them a little bit, but automatically Jayson Tatum, if he does come back, is providing that upgrade per se. If he doesn't come back, that's a little bit what I'm worried about, because if he doesn't come back and they trade Simons, then I could see a scenario in which they start to struggle a little bit, because they have relied on Simons heavily as part of the offense coming off the bench. And if they trade him, yes, they can obviously alter the offensive game plan and the scheme, and Joe Mazzulla can alter his rotations a little bit. And if they do get a good, reliable center in the mix, that's somebody who certainly should be able to help this team out. But when you look at overall the picture of where the Celtics are right now, it's going to be an adjustment period, and bringing back Jayson Tatum would at least help soften the blow a little bit of losing a guy like Simons, who has been so integral to this team. So I know when they brought in Simons, there were a lot of mixed feelings from people. I was personally excited. Good young talent who I felt like if he could get really going offensively, then he could be a big piece of this team. But it was pretty clear when they did bring him in that he was only meant to be a temporary piece. So the question is, where do they go from here? That's going to be a question we're asking over the next week or so prior to the trade deadline. But there's no doubt about the fact that this Celtics team is ready to compete. They're ready to go out there. They're ready to make a deep playoff run. And when you have a guy like Jaylen Brown at the helm who's hungry and really wants to win, you feel confident in that squad that you have in front of you to be able to make that happen. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this Celtics team does moving forward. The Pistons are a tough team in the Eastern Conference. If they face them in the postseason, having Jayson Tatum back could really help give them an edge, especially because the Pistons have seen the Celtics already more than once this season, and they have seen their offensive scheme without Tatum. So Tatum coming back and them facing the Pistons in a playoff series, that could work in the Celtics' favor, because when they draw up a new offensive scheme with Jayson Tatum as part of it, that could work in their favor, because the Pistons aren't going to be used to what the Celtics are playing and the style and the offensive scheme that they're implementing. So that could be promising. They could throw off a lot of teams if they bring Jayson Tatum back. So the biggest questions and biggest takeaways from this show: is Jayson Tatum going to return? There seems to be some hesitancy there, primarily on his own end and him not wanting to break up the chemistry that the team established without him. For two, is Giannis going to be traded to the Celtics? Probably not, but one can dream. It just feels like the package that they would be expected to give up and the asking price for Giannis is more than what they would be willing to pay, which is completely understandable when they don't want to break up that chemistry when they're playing so well. And for three, is Anfernee Simons on the trading block this offseason? Most likely, yes. So we'll have to see what happens from here at the trade deadline, but I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to discuss their key center that enters the fold at the trade deadline. So don't forget to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms, and go Celtics. Make sure to continue to tune in Monday through Thursday, and I'll catch you next time.